Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast for intermediate to advanced level English learners. What is Roe v. Wade? Why is it such a controversial and significant decision? And why is the US Supreme Court going to reverse it? By the end of today's episode of Thinking in English, you should be able to answer all of these questions and have learned some very useful legal English vocabulary. Check out the transcript of the episode, available for free on thinkinginenglish.blog, and also have a look at my Instagram page, Thinking in English Podcast. I put lots of great content on there as well. Here is today's vocabulary list. As always, the written list is available in the description of the podcast and also on my blog, thinkinginenglish.blog. To leak. To leak. This means to allow secret information to become generally known, as in, he leaked the names of the suspects to the press. To overturn. To overturn. To change a legal decision. For example, the Supreme Court overturned their earlier decision. Absolute. Absolute. Very great, or to the largest degree possible. For example, I have absolute faith in her judgment. Trimester. Trimester. A human pregnancy is divided into 3-month periods called trimesters. For example, women are usually offered their first scan in the first trimester of pregnancy. Pseudonym. Pseudonym. A pseudonym is a name someone uses instead of their real name. George Orwell was a pseudonym. His real name was Eric Blair. To terminate. To terminate. To end or stop. As in, they terminated my contract in October. To hear. To hear. Officially listened to by a court or council or something similar. As in, the case was heard by the High Court. Egregiously. Egregiously. Extremely bad in a way that is noticeable. For example, the decisions made by that country have been egregiously wrong. If you follow American politics or news, I'm sure you would have heard the words Roe v. Wade at some point in the last few days. A leaked note from the US Supreme Court has revealed that they are currently planning to overturn the Roe v. Wade decision. The news has caused a massive reaction in the US and around the world. There have been countless articles and news reports, both criticizing and celebrating the possibility that Roe v. Wade will no longer be in force. But what is Roe v. Wade? What does it refer to? Why is it so controversial and significant? And why is the US Supreme Court going to reverse their decision? Today, I'm going to try and answer or explain some of these questions. Before I start, though, I should say that this episode will cover a very controversial topic: abortion. For this reason, I'm not going to make this episode a debate. Instead, I'm going to focus on the politics and decisions that are about to be made. And as always, when you approach a controversial topic like this, I want you all to try to think critically and logically. After listening to today's episode, hopefully you will have a greater understanding of the issue, be able to understand the news a little easier, and learn some new vocabulary to talk about law, politics, and abortion. So let's start at the beginning. What is Roe v. Wade? Roe v. Wade is the name of a lawsuit that eventually became a US Supreme Court case. In 1973, the Roe v. Wade decision established a constitutional right to abortion in the USA. In other words, abortion became legal in the US in every single state. More specifically, the Supreme Court decided that in the USA, there was an absolute right to abortion during the first trimester of a pregnancy. Abortion is a highly controversial issue. It is the deliberate ending of a pregnancy, most often during the first 28 weeks of a pregnancy. There are many reasons why someone may want an abortion, from health implications, unwanted pregnancy, economic problems, age, or crime. Before the Roe v. Wade decision in 1973, abortion was generally illegal across the US. Only 4 states allowed abortion broadly, and 16 others in limited circumstances, such as underage or crime. This meant women were often forced to carry on with their pregnancy, even though it may have been unwanted or dangerous for themselves. Furthermore, women who still wanted an abortion in a state where it was illegal often had to turn to unsafe, unlicensed, and unregulated medical procedures. In 1969, an unmarried and unemployed 22-year-old called Norma McCorvey became pregnant for the 3rd time. She decided that she didn't want to have another child and instead wanted an abortion. However, as McCorvey was from Texas, a US state that only allowed abortion if it saved a woman's life, she was not permitted to undergo the procedure. McCorvey launched a legal case against the state of Texas. She sued for the right to have an abortion. And to protect her identity, McCorvey was given a pseudonym, a fake name. That name was Jane Roe. The district attorney of Dallas in Texas was the person responsible for enforcing Texas state law. So it was his job to make sure that the abortion ban was strictly enforced. At the time, Henry Wade was district attorney, and he was the person sued by McCorvey, or Roe as her pseudonym was. Hence the court case, Roe v. Wade. After years of legal cases in different courts, during which time McCorvey actually had her child and put it up for adoption, Roe v. Wade eventually found its way to the US Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the highest, most powerful, and most influential court in the USA. The Supreme Court plays a significant role in US politics. It ensures that the President and Congress act appropriately. It blocks laws or policies that violate the Constitution of the US. And it ensures that no government can persecute minorities. It is also the last point in the legal system. If the Supreme Court decides something, there is no chance at appealing. The only option is if they change their mind in a future case. In 1973, the court considered the question, does the Constitution recognize a woman's right to terminate her pregnancy by abortion? After hearing the arguments from both sides, a majority of the justices on the court decided that the Constitution did recognize a woman's right to terminate her pregnancy. Basically, the court agreed with Roe, or specifically, they found a complete ban on abortion was against a woman's right to privacy. Out of the 9 justices on the Supreme Court, 7 decided in support of a woman's right to abortion. And importantly, the Supreme Court in 1973 was a very conservative court, mainly appointed by conservative Republican presidents. They decided that the decision to have an abortion in the first 3 months of pregnancy should be left to a woman and her doctors, and should not be a decision made by the government. Immediately after the decision, abortion bans in 30 US states were cancelled. The Supreme Court decides on how to read the US Constitution, and therefore it is the most powerful, or it is more powerful than any state law. However, the decision did not completely allow abortion. It did allow states to regulate and restrict abortion in late pregnancy. Essentially, the case created a trimester-based system. Women were given the absolute right to abortion in the first trimester, or the first 3 months of a pregnancy. Governments were allowed to regulate the second trimester of a pregnancy, but not to ban it completely. And states were allowed to ban or restrict abortion in the final trimester, the final 3 months of a pregnancy, when the baby is likely able to live. Over the past 50 years, other court cases have challenged the Roe v. Wade decision and changed abortion in the US. But until now, the right to abortion has been protected in the USA. Until now. Earlier this month, a leaked document from the Supreme Court seemed to suggest an end to the rights guaranteed by Roe v. Wade. The court is currently considering another abortion-related case, and the draft opinion written by Justice Alito states that Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. The court case is challenging a Mississippi law which bans abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy. And if the court supports Mississippi, it will basically end the Roe v. Wade decision. Although no decision has been made yet, and justices do change their opinions regularly in the months leading up to a final decision, this document is the clearest sign ever that the right to abortion may end in the USA. If the court decided to support Mississippi and overturn Roe v. Wade, it doesn't necessarily mean that abortion will become illegal immediately. Rather, the laws and decisions about abortion will now be left up to each of America's 50 states. However, half of America's states already have laws or bills in their legislatures which will immediately or quickly ban abortion as soon as the Supreme Court makes their decision. Arkansas, Idaho, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, North Dakota, South Dakota, Tennessee, Utah, Texas, Oklahoma, and Wyoming all have laws that will come into effect as soon as the decision is made by the Supreme Court. At least another 10 or 15 states will quickly ban or restrict abortion too. The other 20 or so states are likely to continue supporting the right to abortion, and will likely also support women from other states where abortion is currently restricted. Campaigners and activists have also highlighted how banning abortion will mainly affect younger women, poorer women, and African American women, as these are the groups of people most likely to seek abortion in the US. But the states which have been campaigning so hard to ban abortion, well, they don't necessarily have the highest amounts of these women. So here is today's final thought. On today's episode of Thinking in English, I have tried to explain Roe v. Wade, talk about what the impact of the decision was, and also talk a little bit about what will happen if Roe v. Wade is overturned this year. Purposefully, I stayed away from a discussion about whether abortion is right or wrong. That is a personal opinion, a personal choice for you to decide. But the question the Supreme Court and Roe v. Wade case tried to answer 50 years ago was not whether abortion is right or wrong, but who should be able to make that decision. Should the government, who in America are almost always old white men, be the people making the decision over who can get an abortion? Or should it be a personal decision made by a woman and her doctors? Do you think the US Supreme Court is making a bad decision if they overturn Roe v. Wade? Is abortion legal or illegal in your country? Let me know in the comments on the blog, the comments on Spotify, or send me a message on Instagram. I always love to hear from my listeners. Also, if you can, please leave a like on Spotify and follow the podcast. I'm trying to get to 50,000 followers on Spotify soon. Follow me on Instagram. I'd like 4,000 followers on Instagram soon as well. Make sure you go to the blog and subscribe and follow me everywhere. All the links are in the description of the podcast. Thank you all so much for listening today, and have a great afternoon, morning, evening, whenever you're listening to this. Just have a great day.